I think the closest experience to launching a church in my own life was the feeling I had after my oldest son came home from the hospital and thinking these doctors are going to let us leave with this baby. I have no idea what I'm doing. I truly have no idea. I know the big ticket items, never shake a baby, he needs to eat, he needs to have his diapers changed. But beyond that, I was like, I'm clueless. And being a pastor of like an early church really felt like that. Like, I just didn't know what I didn't know. Every Sunday there was a new service to figure things out. Every week there were new problems, there were new people. Every week there was new stories, new amazing things happening. And it was just this tornado of activity happening.
Starting something new is tricky. You dream and plan and pray and push to a launch, and it's tempting for that to feel like a finish line. You did it. You've talked about this idea and met so many people who worked so hard, and you did it. But for a church, that launch service is just the beginning. Sunday comes every week, and a growing church means more people and more problems. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. It's September 2014, and Renaissance has just had its launch service. Here's Wendell Wilson, a core team member and previously a deacon at Renaissance.
That very first service was amazing. I was looking forward to maybe 20, 30 people in the room, and we're going to watch this like church grow. And I just remember, I think there was maybe like 100 people in the room the first service or something like that. It wasn't really about the numbers, but it was about watching how many people had been part of this for the past year, like actually come together and be in one room. Because we saw people like a small group of people, and then there were people who came to different soulful sessions, and they might have showed up to one or two, but they didn't show up to all of it. So you just saw a ton of different people throughout this whole year. But that launch day, it just felt like everybody showed up, and it felt almost like a family reunion in a way. Like we were just so excited to see each other.
Here's Caleb Hill. He's a core team member and previously a deacon at Renaissance.
Yeah, it was exciting. There was a lot of very practical things that you don't realize have to be decided until you're in the moment. The one that I remember was we were doing communion. I forget if this was the first service or the first time we did communion, but I've been to churches in the past where the person who serves communion might also say something like, "Peace be upon you," or "The body of Christ broken for you and his blood shed for you," when serving it to the people coming down. And I remember thinking, are we supposed to say anything? Or should we just stand there, hold the elements and smile? Or is there like a thing that we should do? Because whatever we do here in the first, event might be the thing that we do for a long time. It was those things. I'm sure somebody had thought about it, but I wouldn't have necessarily thought about all those little things until the moment that we're actually doing them for the first time.
It's funny to think about that day. We had a spreadsheet with maybe 20 people in volunteer roles, some doing double duty of welcoming people in, of setting up the communion. I can remember just ordering random things that we had in our apartment, the signs, the communion cups, the plates, the baskets to pass, setting up the slides and running the slides as we were trying to train people. The slides person used to sit in the very front row. The lights used to be up. The auditorium looked very different. No TVs mounted for screens. No air conditioning, tan curtains, which I think is just whenever anyone hears tan curtains from those early days, they're triggered. So yeah, it was just a very different vibe. We roped off the sides. We anticipated having a big congregation on that launch Sunday, but not knowing how many people it would be. And it was a lot of family and friends. It was Jordan's grandmother. It was Jerron's family too that was there, which was amazing. It was just incredible that we did it. And Jordan, I think I still have a photo of him passed out on the couch that afternoon when he finally got through it all, exhausted. But then it was also like, oh, and we have to do this every Sunday. It was the start though. And it's certainly true that to start a church takes a whole lot of effort. You're focused on finding people and finding a location and figuring out what you're going to stand for. And a lot of energy gets put into launching a church, getting off the ground. But the thing is, once you do in fact launch that church, what do you do next? Our first sermon series, we went through our values.
Even then, I realized the importance of values and less about the tactics of what we were doing, but just to truly try to embed the values that we hope to shape this community. Ultimately, we wanted our church to be around the gospel, the message that for 2,000 years has shaped people's lives, billions around the globe. This message was not about you doing a better job, but really truly about a God who's in pursuit of us and the person of Jesus Christ, and that being the foundation for everything we do. And so every approach to growth is not about do a better job, or our approach to community is not about you should do this. It's that God has made a way for us to be one in community. And the right response, the only natural response to the gospel, is a life that honors him. So much of the scripture writers, when they talk about it, they say like a life worthy of the gospel. It really is a message that transcends everything. One of our mentors, Tim Keller, used to say, the gospel is not the ABCs of Christianity. Oh, this is just what you got to get through the door, but it is the A to Z. It is all things. It really is at the hub of the wheel. So that's the most important value. We valued community, not wanting to just be a church that comes together on Sunday morning, has amazing services, but that people are truly tightly knit and in each other's lives. I quickly realized that it would be impossible for me to be in relationship with more than 9 people, but the goal wasn't that everybody knows everybody, but that everybody really knew someone, and someone who could truly walk along them in their life and help sharpen them. And so much of my walk with God was shaped, formed, crystallized, impacted by other people, and it still is to this day. Community is so valuable. Discipleship is a huge value of ours. In New York City, there are so many things that can form us and shape us. Discipleship is a complicated word to some, but it basically just means taking the next step in obedience to follow Jesus. We wanted our community to be marked by taking the next step in faith to follow Jesus. The other value that I probably will rename at some point is diversity. 10 years ago, it meant something different than what it means now. Post George Floyd, where everybody has a DEI policy at their corporation. It just means make sure more people are there of different colors. And that really wasn't our goal for diversity. It really is just this concept that our neighborhood, for better or for worse, is full of different people. And if the message of the gospel is true, then it needs to bring these different people who live on the same block together. And so truly what it means to be a family of believers in a new family of Jesus coming together across socioeconomic, ethnic lines to be one faith family following Jesus. And the last one is justice. One of the things that I've really thought about my whole life has been justice, this concept of what does it look like to be a person who follows Jesus, a just God, and doesn't just want to do acts of mercy, but wants to see people flourish and thrive. I've heard it described as mercy is if you see a group of people beaten and bloodied at the bottom of a mountain, mercy is bandaging them up and making sure they're okay. But justice is trying to discover why are they falling off the mountain in the first place, and then going up and building a fence to make sure people don't fall off in the first place. And so we wanted to be a community not just of mercy and doing acts of mercy, but getting to more deeper causes as to human flourishing so that people would thrive. So those are the values we try to insert into everything we do now, but certainly early on, we wanted that to be the bedrock of what we were doing.
This is Janelle Capelli, a key volunteer at Renaissance who still serves faithfully today.
The early days at Renaissance were just the essentials: God and people curious and eager to get closer and learn more about him and ultimately grow together. It was really bare bones in a good way. And that was personally really important for me as a young adult, reframing my faith and making it my own for the very first time in my life. When I first started going to Renaissance, I came with my roommate. And I will be honest, I couldn't wrap my head around meeting in a school. It felt like a New York City gimmick, and I felt like there was going to be some gotcha moment at any point. But I was pleasantly surprised and just so thankful that I found a community of people who were committed to figuring out faith together and figuring out how to grow deeper in their faith and committed to figuring out how to put their faith in action in tangible ways. And because New York City is so transient and oftentimes transactional, it was really refreshing to be in a place that was rooted in values that were lasting. It's also been really amazing to see an authentic and consistent demonstration of our core values over the years, and also an appreciation, empathy, and acknowledgement for the diverse needs and backgrounds across our congregation.
Here's Renaissance's children's ministry director, Tanya Velado.
As I thought about the families that would come to Renaissance, I knew that we were going to have this beautiful community come into the church that has family units that look different. We were going to have 2-parent families, single-parent families, grandparents that bring their grandkids, aunts and uncles that bring their children, neighbors that bring children. And so I wanted to make sure that every family and every child that comes through the door see themselves represented in our kids ministry. And that comes through with the choices that we make about what visuals we use, what teaching videos we use, worship that we use, the videos we use in the worship context, the books that we use, the dolls and the figurines that we have in the classroom, and then also our leaders as well. There are individuals in our team that come from different family backgrounds. There are people who have built connections and been able to come along with the people that come through the door so that everybody can know our kids ministry is for every family.
This is Alicia Diaz Bernardez, a Harlem native and member who still attends with her family.
When Renaissance started, Yessie was about to turn 1. I remember Jordan and Jess were at her first birthday. Just to watch her grow in life is crazy. I can't believe she's in middle school now. To watch her go through all of the stages, Renaissance has been really good because there's always been a place for her. When she was younger, Tanya always tells the story that she had to get a bottle warmer. And Yessie was the first person that made them get a bottle warmer because her milk needed to be warmed up at 12 o'clock noon every Sunday. It's really interesting to watch her grow alongside all the people who have been here.
And then there was also community groups that were happening. We knew that was going to be a big part of what we did. It would be impossible for us to know everyone in the church, but the goal was for everyone to know someone. But we did have this point where we really wanted to decide, how do we even structure community groups? In some ways it was, do we let people pick based on their availability and schedule? But we had concerns about what that might lead to if we just let people choose their group.
Yeah, early on in the church, we noticed that the easiest thing for people to do is to follow their clique and keep running with the same pack you've been running with, and then have a slightly different clique in the church. We realized that if we truly are going to be this lighthouse, this group of people that were going to be an example of what it means to be in a new family of Jesus coming together, that it wasn't going to happen without a lot of intentionality. Our community groups were just mix and matching, making sure that there was a lot of representation across gender, ethnic, socioeconomic lines, so that it wasn't a homogenous group of people. And our bet then was something that really truly has shown fruit, was that if we create grooves now, then it really will create a culture later. But we didn't have any culture set up. It was brand new. We couldn't just rely on how things had been done because nothing had been done before. We had to be really intentional about it so that we could hopefully see it embedded in the culture later. Well, some of the community groups did amazing and they thrived, and the relationships from those groups persist through the present. Other groups did not do so well. For early community groups, so much was about the leader. It was before we had the model we have now, and they were self-guided experiences that depended on the community group leader to be helpful, to know how to truly navigate diverse groups of people. I wish I would have had more time to train, to coach. But to be honest, so much stuff was new that I didn't even know what I didn't know.
Yeah. It is an interesting thing. There's the people who were the core with us and wanting to be with them, but new people are coming every week, and some people are experiencing really significant crisis, and it is hard because you feel like if people are stable, they don't get a ton of your time because there's just fires to be put out, and you wish it didn't have to be that way. You find yourself back against the wall, needing to pick and choose.
I felt consumed with this early wave of good, bad, and ugly, and everything in between, that it really was like this dizzying experience and just feeling so out of my depths. The church, just like a newborn, the church in its early ages was just fragile. It just was fragile. We had no reputation. We had no experience with people to which we can like bank on. Every sermon in the early months, I was like so nervous. I remember one time walking to PS 76 thinking, I don't like to do this. I don't know why I'm a pastor. I really hate this feeling. And it was like 9:00. I was walking to the school to get ready, and I was miserable upstairs preparing. I can't do this for 20 years and just be so anxious and nervous, because I really felt like a bad sermon means the church empties out. And that says a whole lot about me. Thankfully, I've grown out of that. I no longer feel that fear. I do love Sunday mornings. It's nowhere near that anxious and anxiety inducing anymore. Now, if people don't like it and they leave, that's great. We want them to go somewhere and be plugged in.
Do you remember when we baptized the first person at Renaissance?
I remember that first baptism class, Dr. Amber Field. The glow up on that story is crazy. Amber, she preaches and teaches at Renaissance, and to have seen her life, her journey with Jesus, with her family, it's just been incredible. Dr. Field is very inquisitive, and I remember that baptism class, talking to her, she just had such a deep conviction about God and His Word. And that conviction has carried with her through the present as she teaches scripture and preaches on stage.
Here's Dr. Amber Field, the first person baptized at Renaissance. Amber now regularly teaches at the church.
I remember when Jordan preached some sermon that left me wondering, what does it mean to know God? And I will never forget how I felt in that moment. I went on this journey and I told my friends about this journey. I was asking God to help me answer, who are you? I remember being open and knowing, I don't know how He's going to answer this question. I don't know even what this question means, but just saying, Lord, show me who you are. In my time at Renaissance, I've been able to get to know God better. Then Jordan was saying, we're going to have this baptism class. I was like, yeah, I want to do that. Something about the space and the connection and the family and the home that I felt pretty immediately at Renaissance was like, I want to know more about this. I took the class and that was it. It just made me to profess my faith in front of everyone like that. And I remember my mom being there, my dad being there, and the girls and Rob watching me. And I was like, this was home.
This is Alicia again. She was the second person to be baptized at Renaissance.
Baptism, I think I just had a lot of questions about it. I didn't really understand if it was necessary. And so when Jordan spoke about the baptism class, I just wanted to know more, and learning that it is a proclamation of my faith. Just like marriage, you get in a relationship with somebody, but marriage in front of witnesses is like the proclamation, the declaration that, hey, yes, we are in love and we're doing this forever. I do think that I just was in a season of my life where I was ready. Me getting baptized symbolized a seriousness of my relationship with God. Me saying, hey, I think I want to take a step of faith towards you. I've been learning about you all my life, and we've had our ups and downs and whatnot, but I want to dedicate my life. And I think the baptism at the time was a great way to represent that.
Another thing that happened in that first fall, right after we launched, is we went through the emotionally healthy spirituality course.
Yeah, me and you.
Yeah, at New Life Fellowship in Queens.
Early on, I knew that if we were going to have a long-term good relationship, forget the church, that like we needed something outside of the church to help us. Shout out to Pete and Jerry Scazzaro. They were hosting it at New Life Fellowship in Queens. And us and someone else from our core team would go out there and week by week learn the principles of what it meant to slow down, to have a slow down spirituality, to connect with God and to connect with each other. And that really was crucial for us, because if not, I would have just been running at a pace that would have been destructive to my soul. That just made me stop on Fridays. And instead of just working on the sermon some more, I would be like, you know what? Nope, I'm just going to stop. And whatever it is, what it is. It was very hard to stop at first because I really needed the church to go well, not just for the mission of God, but like internally, I really needed it to go well to prove to myself that I wasn't like a loser or something. The message that I was telling myself, the internal critic.
Yeah, it did really give us a framework for Sabbath, which has, I think, in many ways been the leading force in preserving us in ministry over the last 10 years. Yeah. And then also gave us framework for looking at our families of origin, how that plays out in our interactions with each other, with people who come to our church, which is huge. I think so many times leaders are, and myself included, blinded to times when I'd have an interaction and not see how it connected somehow to my past, how I was comparing that person I was in a conversation with to someone in my past, how they were comparing me. I think you dealt with that way more even than me as this leader, and in some cases even fatherly figure. You could experience moments when someone might be projecting onto you the frustration they had with a boss, with God, or with a parent. Emotionally healthy spirituality was helpful in introducing us to bigger categories of how to think about our internal world and how we were interacting with people.
Yeah, unless you're aware of how your past impacts the present, it's impossible to realize that other people's past impacts the present. For a lot of reasons, I was helped by that to realize, oh, this conversation that I'm having right now is not just about Sunday and point two in the message. There's a whole suitcase that they're bringing with them. And that was really helpful for me to differentiate and to comb through what was helpful and what wasn't helpful in the early years.
That first year, with all the highs and amazing things that we were seeing, there was also hard things. Our son was born about 9 months into the church planting journey after the launch of the church. But right around that time, my father got into a significant car accident.
Yeah.
We found out that he had dementia, had suffered multiple strokes. And that was the beginning of a long journey, even with him and his health.
To be honest, it was just too much. Like, some stuff doesn't make sense in the moment. You can better understand it as you look back. As I look back, all of the emotional toll of that whole season, him coming up and visiting, and just like what that meant for us, new rhythms, new expectations. In some ways, when we found out how bad his dementia was, it was like the start of the grieving process, that the man you knew was no longer there. And that was just tough. And then to have that toughness and say the Friday email needs to come out, it was just a lot. I think our brain protects us from how much is going on in the moment, because it would just overwhelm us if we did. And as I look back on those early years of just all the stuff that was happening, it was just so much going on, and God, he protected us from it just overwhelming us. But we also had respite. We had the Sabbath. We had time where we would pull away from the church on purpose to be humans. And I think that's what Sabbath has helped me to be, to be a human, that I'm Jordan Rice. Mm-hmm. I'm a human being. I have needs. I have fears and grief and joys and delights.
We were able to be a part of the community as well. Maybe not as much as we hoped always, but we were in those early community groups, whether we attended ones not in our home or hosted them in our home. Those community groups rallied around us when we went through all the things.
Yeah, big
when
time.
Jameson was born, when my father was ill. That was really special and meaningful too.
I used to always be really miserable in community groups because I was always grading myself of how well this is going. And it was tough for me to like really partake. And it really did take the bigger things for me to let go of whatever sense of control I thought I had and just be a part of the community and receive from people.
I remember in that first year, maybe the second year, how it seems church plants are wonderful at attracting people who are very passionate about this being their opportunity to have a church that is exactly like what they've always wanted.
In that first year, I think the biggest obstacle for me was the internal critic I have of myself and also the external critics. I feel like there's people in life that truly want to help you, and they will point out things that are helpful, constructive, but there are also people who are just critical, not helpful. They're just seeking to be destructive. Early on, I was afraid of the critics. I was afraid of making the wrong step and hearing people, some of the people who are part of our community, and their criticism, and I was trying to avoid it. I think if I knew you were really into justice, when I talked about the values, I'd list that one first. So it wasn't like I was lying, but I was the people pleaser. I was a chameleon to a certain extent, that I really wanted to put the best foot forward in conversations. Now I'm the opposite. Now I'm like, I don't think we're the church for you. I've learned that the hard way of overpromising. In the early days, I realized that this person truly is passionate about this being a thing we talk about all the time. You can't have 97 cooks in the kitchen. Learning through the early disappointments and leadership immaturity that I had, every young pastor has, of not knowing what to do, but learning those lessons the hard way. I wanted God to take away like people pleasing from me. And I was really hoping that God would do it through a sermon. Like God would show me something in a Bible study and it would like, oh man, the people pleasing left my body. It just floated away. But really like to pray for God to free me from like people pleasing, God gave me criticism. In doing so, God showed me like, yo, this is not going to kill you, bro. And it really fortified me. I think you have to be careful with that because some people, it calluses not just your exterior, but it also calluses you internally. I never want to not have a soft heart. But in many ways, that first year was God freeing me through so much by allowing us, the whole church, to go through some criticism and then not killing us and refining us and making us more resilient and more together as a church.
My observation of you during that time, I just had a lot of admiration and appreciation for the weight it is to hold a vision and to maintain a vision. The fortitude that it required for you to have the 97 voices around and still be very prayerful and seeking God's face and having discernment about what are the things that I need to hold on to as I lead this group of people. I'm not sure when I looked at you that I would have always been able to do it in the way that you did. It was really amazing.
I appreciate that. I might be too self-deprecating at times. Ultimately, this is the thing I've been thinking about for the last 20 years in one form or another. And there's always a competing interest. We should do this. Oh, have you ever thought about? Not bad ideas either. Like some of these are really good ideas, but just not true to what I felt like God has called us to be. I felt like God really was showing me like, yo, this is what it's going to be, and to hold my hand and to trust and to just keep moving one foot in front of the other one. And so I think the loneliness of it, of not everybody being able to kind of see what I was going to see, and that really was an obstacle to like really staying the course.
I think also as a small church, you really get confronted with limitations. You're really forced because of resources to say no to good things. I don't know if everyone has always understood it that way. Maybe they felt Jordan is saying no to this idea. I do think the restraint required to protect the fragile state of the church, you do have to embrace. We are not a mega church. We are not able to do all the different programs. Even we had people who left our church because in those early years, we didn't have a middle school ministry. It was important for those families to see their kids connect with other kids their age around faith, and that was painful. We had to embrace that limitation.
I've learned now something I didn't know then, that limits were a gift to us. And they were a gift to us in weird wrapping. because it didn't feel like a gift. It felt like something really bad. That was tough because these were great ideas. Just wasn't yet. Those limits were a gift to us because it helped us to say, we're not going to move ahead of God. It's also really crazy to think about where we've come over the decade and all the amazing leaders we have at the church lead different things in such powerful ways that are consistent with the culture of our church. Limits never feel good at the time. They always feel like a punishment, but it's really God's gift to us to go slow, to be prayerful, to be dependent. That's the thing about John the Baptist. John the Baptist knew who he was and who he wasn't.
Yes.
I'm not the Christ.
Mm-hmm.
The one who's coming, I'm not worthy to tie his sandals. And there's all these people coming to John the Baptist, and then everybody left him and started following Jesus.
Yeah. And his disciples were like, are you really going to let this new dude step on the scene and steal the spotlight?
Yep.
And he was like, listen,
I'm not the Christ. And I think the discernment is not just what's a good idea, what's a bad idea, but am I the person to do this? And am I the person to do this right now?
And is Renaissance the church to do it?
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And is Renaissance the church to do that right now?
Here's Lester Kim, on staff as associate pastor at Renaissance.
My story with Renaissance began in the summer of 2015. A few years before then, my family and I moved back to New York City from California. During the whole time of us coming back, I actually was now working at a church for about 2-3 years. Just couldn't find a position that was the right fit. So I ended up doing other things. After around 3 years, a neighbor said, hey, I heard about this church called Renaissance. They have a job posting. And so looked up the church, seemed fine, sent my resume, didn't hear anything. Sent another follow-up email, no response. After several emails, I told my wife, this church stinks. I don't understand why they can't be professional and respond to an email. I said, let's just go check it out. Found out that Renaissance was 6 blocks from where we were living. Said, let's just check it out. Went there for one service. The first time we went there, the minute we walked in and we heard the first message, we immediately knew that this was going to be the place for us. There was a sense of home, sense of familiarity, and at the same time, we felt like this is where we wanted to be. Growing up my whole life in church, I think it was the first time probably in a real consistent and real, I hate using the word authentic, but let's just use it for now. I think we're hearing messages that we never heard before. Most of the time, it's about reading the Bible, doing good things, pray. God is good. All the time, God is good. But then I think what was unique about Renaissance is we were hearing, especially from Jessica and Jordan's story, about real people who encountered real things and real challenges in their life and how a real God met them in real ways. And so what kind of made an impact was like even the first Advent series that year of 2015. It was the first time in my life going to a church where it was not a typical Christmas story about Jesus' birth, which is totally fine and normal to do, but it was like a 5-week series on suffering, of people sharing their different struggles and issues of their own lives. And so I was really taken aback in a good way and really blessed by it. My wife and I are the type of folks that once we're plugged in, or once we pick a church, we serve just because it's the best way to get plugged in. And we just feel like that's part of what a good, faithful Christian is supposed to do. So around that time, we also decided to go to the membership class. So there were, I think, two or three staff at the time. And we met in person. And then we split up into individual interviews. And lo and behold, my wife and I got to meet Jordan. He was the one interviewing us, wanted to get to know a little bit more about us. And during that time, everything seemed fine. The church values, vision, beliefs were lining up to a lot of what we believed. But I did mention to Jordan, I said, hey, just a quick feedback on your church. I said, so far, love Renaissance, love everything about it, but you really need to work on your communication because it's super discouraging and unprofessional that I emailed you guys like 4 or 5 times and no one responded. I think it's really not cool. Jordan was surprised. He had no idea I applied for that position. And I won't get into why no one responded, but it got resolved later on. So all this to say, Jordan found out from my interview during membership that I was an ordained Presbyterian minister And here I am at a non-denominational church, which is a stretch growth area for me as well. So we signed up to just host small groups because like we're still new to the church. And back then there were three choices. You can host, you can lead, or you can just join. And so we just thought, hey, let's just host. We don't know anyone here. We're still new to the church. And on the first week of community groups, we found out that we were hosting and leading. It was a surprise for us. So whatever, we'll just roll with it. So it's not like it's a new thing for us. So I said, fine. I had no idea. I was not prepared to lead. I don't know anybody here at all, but whatever. We've been doing this forever, so let's just do it. So we were hosting and leading. I think the impression that we left on Jordan was, this is very early on, like small groups for Renaissance. Our first week of meeting, we got into a lot of hot button issues, and we were just arguing with one another for our first meeting. And so Jordan called me that same week saying, yo, what's going on? I'm getting all these phone calls from your community group. And I think he was alarmed and probably, I don't know, annoyed, frustrated, scared that I'm blowing up a community group. But it ended up being a blessing in disguise because we got past all the superficial kind of niceness, and we got to, our group really became really super close, and we got to respect and understand one another. And so it was one of those stories I think Jordan might share every now and then about a group that initially started blowing up each other's faces just because we started talking about something. But in the end, because we listened to one another, really grew close together. So we became a model of a good community group. And so after that, I think just being part of Renaissance for a while, not only was I helping out with community groups, Jordan would ask me to teach and periodically preach here and there. And so less than a year later, after I think maybe trusting me with not being like too crazy, and also just I think just being a faithful member, Jordan asked me to join the staff April 1st, 2016. And so that's when I came on staff.
We really have seen over and over again that sometimes the no that we get from God is a not yet, and we have to be patient and see where he's leading us. So we're approaching the second anniversary of the church, 2016, and things are going well. The church is growing, and you start to think what?
I've had two major leadership crises at Renaissance. The first was when we took away orange juice and bagels from people in the lobby.
Yes, for anybody newer at Renaissance.
There was a whole group about to start a coup to overthrow the leadership.
In the lobby, we would have orange juice, coffee, and bagels.
Yes.
Before, so people could set that up and then go into the auditorium. This was one of those things that we'd seen at another church. Felt
it was
like
a great idea.
It's a great idea. We should do it too.
Yep.
Not knowing that it would be a nightmare to do the bagel order every week, to clean up the gross table.
Our idea was, this is y'all fault, Renaissance. At this other church, people get there early, they have coffee and bagels, 11 o'clock starts, they walk into worship service, it's great. People were showing up at 11:17 for an 11 o'clock service, then getting coffee and bagels, talking in the lobby. They wouldn't come in until like halfway through the sermon. So yeah, we had to take it away. That was leadership crisis number one, navigating our church through the polarizing issue of removing coffee and bagels. My parents were like, is everything okay financially? Can we afford coffee? I'm like, Mom, we could afford this joint. We just not people who show up too late already as it is.
I think they volunteered to bring the orange juice.
Yes, my mother would bring orange juice and just put it on the counter. That was one. But then the second was launching the second service. I realized this was going to be a bigger cultural shift for the church. People loved the way it felt at one service because they knew everybody and it felt manageable. There was this cool community. It's like you being up on a new designer before everybody else is up on it. And that's what it felt like for so many people. So then going to two services to make room for new people, that's when we really started to communicate the goal of our Christian community, not that everybody would know everybody, but that everybody would know someone. We wanted to make space for the message of the gospel to get free, to really have more ability for people to choose that. That was fun on our second anniversary, launching the second service. It put a lot of stress on our team.
It was a big faith moment for our staff, a growing moment, because I think we also didn't exactly know how it was going to go. You had this picture, this vision. You're often the vision guy, and you're telling us it's going to be great. And we're like, we're having a hard enough time to schedule the 20-something volunteers we need on an average Sunday. How are we going to do this with 2 services? Now we have to have 40 people. And it's just so interesting how in making that space, God filled the space.
Yeah, it really was pretty incredible.
Like we weren't at 400 people in the auditorium at that
No,
point.
we
We
were
were
not.
maybe around 250.
It was starting to feel full, but definitely not nowhere near
Yes.
to being full.
Yes, and going to the 2 services to 10 a.m. and 11:30, that 10 a.m. service felt very light.
Yeah. When God calls people to move in faith, it truly is that we walk by faith and not by sight. And there's obviously stupid decisions that you can make and do things that are not just against wisdom. But I felt like the times in the church where God was calling us to move by faith to something else, that he wasn't going to immediately show us, see, this is why it was a great idea, but we were going to have a little bit of wilderness to walk around, and we were going to have to trust him step by step and just trust him to be God. You know what? I think the bigger thing that God wants for me, that the story of this church wouldn't be that every decision that we've made or I've made has just been like, oh, this is such a no-brainer, such an easy thing, but that we trusted him. I seriously hope to God that if the Lord gives us health and we're able to lead this church for another decade, 15 years, 20 years, whatever that is, I hope to God that we're able to say we trusted him. That not every sermon was the I have a dream speech, but we trusted him. We really did trust him.
Children's Ministry Director Tanya again.
That was one of the best announcements that I ever heard, that we were going to 2 services. I was so excited because it was going to unlock opportunities that we didn't have before. I had no fear of us being fully staffed. That had such a positive impact on Renaissance kids. Before, a volunteer would serve once a month because we wanted that volunteer in the community and being able to be in the services. And so when we went to 2 services, that then allowed volunteers to be even more consistent with our children. We began to see volunteers grow in their serving in Renaissance Kids. We had volunteers that everybody was serving once a month, and now we have volunteers that serve twice a month, 3 times a month, 4 times a month, because now there's always an opportunity to worship and serve on the same Sunday.
Here's Kimberly Austin, another key volunteer who has been with Renaissance since the start.
I first met Jessica and Jordan in someone's home in their apartment. And they talked about this idea of a church where you're really trying to connect people to each other and to Jesus and serving the community of Harlem. All of that resonated with me. And so the first service that was held, that felt really exciting for me personally, I was like, oh, this is a space where I can reconnect. I can learn more about Jesus. I can learn more about what faith looks like in my life. And I can learn how to serve other people who live very close to me. I remember us being 1 service and then remember us being 2. And I was like, yeah, that's a good decision. We're a little cramped in here. We're a little tight. That makes a lot of sense. I never really felt it as unexpected or unusual. It was just more people, more energy. I knew fewer faces, but that's okay, because that really pushed me to meet folks better. It was about that point when I did decide to join DNA groups, the community groups back then, as a way to meet more people, because I was realizing that I was going into church, and if my folks weren't there, I was surrounded by people that I didn't know, and I wanted to change that a little bit. And I think now the fact that we have the fellowship hall is a great way of making the church small again, creating that space after church to hang out, be with each other, talk and connect. I really like that. And so I know there's been a growth. I'm not on staff, so I don't have to think about all those logistics of the growth, but it feels seamless. It feels like the direction we're supposed to go in.
The unique thing about New York is you can feel really alone when you could be standing on the proverbial Times Square surrounded by people, and you look around and you think, well, everyone must have someone they have in their life, and you feel super isolated, and your sense of loneliness or being alone is just heightened and accentuated. And so while I do want us as a church to be centered around God's word, I understand that we just need connection.
Another pivotal thing in those first few years was Tripp coming on staff to lead our worship team. That was such a critical piece of what we were doing, not only because worship through song is important to the worship experience and service, but also just managing what it is like to build a worship team in a diverse, multicultural context.
I think it starts with before he even came on the team. It really starts with his first Sunday. And we always laughed about his connection card. He had every box checked that he was going to serve in kids. He was going to serve in every capacity. He signed up for membership. He signed up for everything that first day. And we just looked at his connection card like, yo, who is this dude?
Who's this psycho?
Yeah, seriously. He's either amazing or he's a psycho. Jury's still out on that.
This is Tripp Hampton. He's on staff as Renaissance's creative director.
I had been living in Harlem at the time for 3 years, and I had really fallen in love with the neighborhood, wanted to be at a church in Harlem where I could walk, where I could feel like I was serving the community. When I came to Renaissance the first time, it was super early days, so it was a mess. But in a beautiful way. My background is in theater, and there were lots of elements that I just thought, oh, this could be better. But I could tell that Jordan was a really gifted communicator. It was local in Harlem. And one thing for me musically, I remember most of that set list actually that they played that day. It was stuff that I had grown up with, stuff that I had just recently learned, like contemporary gospel stuff, a hymn. There was a song that I had never heard before, but that I really liked. I found it really interesting and inspiring. I felt like I could dig in and help in some way and get plugged in. I started attending about 6 weeks into the launch and came on staff spring of 2016. I feel like there's very few times that God makes things really clear for us. I think we all would love some lightning bolts every once in a while from God. My first service at Renaissance was one of those moments. There was a series of events, interactions, the music that was being played, the people that were there, that I just felt like I was meant to be there.
It really came in as a servant.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the most important thing about working with him. He came in as a servant and still is a servant. That mentality on the worship team of seeking to serve this multicultural group of people in Harlem. Harlem is just the mecca of Black culture. And Tripp coming in and wanting to be a blessing to our team, to serve our team, so that the sound of Renaissance could be something unique. We weren't going to just do things like we did it back in the day at Shiloh Baptist Church. I've been thinking about this church for a long time, and the type of people I wanted to feel welcome at this church. And that was a very unique thing. And just some stuff we couldn't copy and paste from anybody else. I mean, this is like, Maverick City was not a thing at this point.
Sure.
There was either you had straight up gospel or it was like Hillsong.
Right.
There really was no like
crossover blend
there was
type
nothing.
worship. Yeah.
There was none of that. And with any new thing, there's always a lot of bumps on the road along the way, but I definitely appreciate my brother's humility through the whole time to where we are now.
I think that the diversity in music had been a natural outpouring that had sort of happened because there were a lot of different hands helping to plan services. When I came on staff in 2016 and was really trying to guide what the worship looked like, I wanted to make sure that diversity obviously stayed intact. What I always say about the music at Renaissance is that My goal is that everybody who walks in the door, whether you've been a church person all your life, you've never been to church, you're from Harlem, you're from middle of America, that in my dream world, no matter where you're coming from, you would either think to yourself, I know that song, or that you would think, I like that. I enjoy that music. I enjoy the way they did that, or I recognize that. I love that song. That song means something to me. When I came on, I think that Jordan was rightfully cautious with me as far as a white guy leading the music in Harlem and what that's going to look like. So he definitely kept an eye on me as far as what songs we were singing, who was singing the songs. And it was a really beautiful experience, to be honest, to learn from him how to maintain and create a diverse community. It's very easy for a lot of people to feel like, oh, that just happens. And it's true. We are in Harlem and we're in New York City. There are people from everywhere around the world here. But I think that churches can very easily lean one way or another as far as their racial makeup. And we still to this day are very intentional about who is on stage, who is leading a song in all directions, that we're really trying to make sure that we're keeping things balanced, keeping things diverse, honoring the neighborhood that we are in, honoring the different backgrounds that we have in the room, that we've got some Presbyterians and we've got some Pentecostals and everybody in between. Trying to maintain that vision is always a priority.
I think a pretty pivotal point also in 2016 was what was happening not inside our church, but in the world around us. And that was the presidential election
Right.
of 2016, which was an earthquake moment for a lot of people in our community.
In New York in general, yeah.
And in New York in general. When the results came, we quickly pulled together a prayer night.
I texted Jordan and was like, should we do something? And he said, yeah, prayer service tonight. So I ran to the office and we put together a very loose outline of what that might be. We gathered and it was a pretty full room, I remember. I played keys and just tried to keep up with where the night was going.
And I think for a lot of people, just grieved together. And I say this knowing that people listening and people within our church may have a range of different political beliefs, but for a large chunk of our community, the results of the 2016 election were scary, upsetting, hurtful, and we came together in that moment really to try to process it together.
Then I also remember praying with my neighbors, people that I was in church with, hearing their prayers, having a thought of, oh, the pain they are feeling or the fear they are expressing in their prayers is not the same. It felt raw and heightened. And yeah, I just remember the visceral nature of that night.
I remember even just weeping in front of everyone. And I'm a crier, but
You are a crier.
I don't want to weep in front of people, but I was just truly overwhelmed in that moment. And I think that was just also at the same time, this opportunity for us to think about how the gospel informed the moment and would inform even how we would live.
And I think that started a 6-month period of growth at the church, frankly. I think that people wanted to be at a place willing to have those feelings, willing to have diversity in the room. Because of that, Jordan had been thinking that one day he would like to do a series on the gospel and race. And it just became that much more timely to do it.
And so it wasn't long after the election that we had this gospel and race sermon series.
Yeah, I think the election in 2016 taught me that we live on an island, not just literally, but figuratively. I was like, we are that disconnected from what was at that point American Christianity. And I was like, oh, we really are on a different island because of just how polarizing I started to sense things were. And so that sent me to a point to where I was really starting to think about how are our people being formed. There's only a certain point to where you can complain about things, and then you have to start to think about what is God's invitation to me in this. And the election happened, and the next 4 years were the next 4 years, and all the things that have happened since then, and who knows what's going to happen this next coming up year. But I think the big invitation to me then was to think more critically about how people are being formed around these major issues of how the gospel impacts this concept of race, reparations, of how do I actually see what the Bible's authors have contributed to this topic in a way that could be helpful for us, not just to be able to respond to something, but rather to build something proactively. There was just so much stuff happening, the string of extrajudicial police shootings and all the things that kind of led us to, well, how do we process this? I think has been a unique contribution to the Christian landscape for people that we were willing to talk about, really do deep dives into heavy waters, slavery. Like, you really can't have a multicultural community unless you're willing to talk about different things in a multicultural community. So not just like, we're a multicultural community that comes together for new family in Jesus. We're a multicultural community that comes together as new family in Jesus. And some of our ancestors were enslaved and some of our ancestors were slavers.
Mm-hmm.
So we got this, that's what it is. And I think the Gospel and Race series was a gracious exploration into what it looks like to be the new family of Jesus with the realities of what America was and is.
Walking through that was a really formative thing for me. I remember having conversations and learning things that I just had never learned before. And I had lived in Harlem at that time for many years, but there's just blind spots and privileges that I walk around with as a white guy. In that series, I remember, for instance, hearing from another member talking about the pain she was feeling because Jordan spoke about Christianity being viewed as the white man's religion and this false narrative about Christianity, and that this woman had experienced that, had been struggling with that with her sister who was not a believer because of this. Like, this was the sticking point. Well, I had never heard that idea in my entire life. And here I am in community with this person who is heartbroken over a family member who has this barrier to faith that I didn't even know existed. It was just really eye-opening to think about. It was just one of those moments to realize that all of our stories are so different, all of our experiences are so different, and it was also a time that helped me realize that the gift of being in a diverse community is that you're getting to experience more of God. You're getting to see him in a more beautiful way because you're with image bearers that are showing you more sides of him, more aspects of him. It deepened my faith in such a beautiful way. It made me see him in new ways. It made me see my community in new ways. It's something that now I can't even imagine not being a part of my faith.
Then also the fact that the series really did not just talk about racism as an external ill that is not good, but really pushed people to also look inward about their own personal bias, whatever their ethnicity or race. And I think that's such a missing piece that we can talk all day and write articles all day and report all day about racism, the system, but people are part of the system and people have biases and we are part of a system. And so if we don't stop to explore our own part of that and how that plays out in our community groups or in our neighborhood, then will anything really change? Probably not. And then to also, of course, as you said, shine light on where Jesus is, and all of that was really profound and meaningful.
I think a lot of the challenge with that is the Black Hebrew Israelites are talking about race all the time. And when a 16-year-old dude walks past them on the street, he's hearing a message about how faith and race intersect. And I'm very respectful to everybody, of course, but not to every viewpoint. And there's a lot of people who fall prey to a lot of terrible theology about who God is, who they are, just because they're the only source. And really, one of the things that we've tried to do and need to continue to do is to offer people a better and truer alternative, that we had to be willing to walk into those spaces so that our community could actually be helped and evangelized and discipled in a way that would be helpful.
Another way that the church was growing and expanding its reach was we had thankfully gotten to a place where a lot of the outside financial support that we had raised before launching the church, we didn't necessarily need anymore, right? We had raised up a budget that we were self-sustaining as a church, that the giving from people at our church could sustain us. And so we didn't need that outside funding anymore. It was such a blessing that we had it. But what was cool about reaching that point, not only were we self-sustaining, but we began to be able to really look at how we could look outside of ourselves and be a blessing to others, particularly in the area of church planting, right? We were this church plant that had been supported, and now we could be the church that could support new churches around the world.
It was a surreal moment to sit on the other side of the table with a church planter who was like telling me all about their vision of what they wanted to see in their city. And because of the generosity of our community, we were able to be a part of church plants happening in Harlem, the Gathering Harlem, in New York City, Lower Manhattan, with Reunion Church and Russell Rader, with a church in Cape Town, South Africa, and church in Lagos, Nigeria. Just over the years, being able to really be generous and to see the gospel go forward. It really felt surreal to be in a position to where like Renaissance was like not just helping them financially, but then also like with the things that we've learned, we were really truly able to pass these things down to people. And that was just a beautiful moment.
Yeah, we certainly leaned on more experienced churches when we were deciding to launch a second service or how to do kids ministry or whatever it might be. And so to be in that position to be able to share what we'd learned with others, I think was amazing. Also, I'm not sure everyone would know how much a joy it was to help launch the Gathering specifically in Harlem. They launched 3 years after us in 2017. And I think in some people's minds, it's like, oh, you're going to help support a new church in your same neighborhood that's going to be meeting just 5 blocks away. Why would you do that? But I think it really speaks to a concept that not everybody sees the way we do, which is that we all benefit from healthy churches. And if there's 500,000 people living in Harlem alone, we need 100 new churches. And so I think we've also seen the fruit of that to be true, that like healthy churches in our neighborhood, we all encourage, feed, support each other, because the vision is to transform our neighborhoods, and we're just one church. But to have many churches doing that is really powerful.
Yeah, my prayer before we even started was that people would find Jesus, find community here. And like our goal was never to steal people from another church down the block.
As we're clarifying the vision of what Renaissance will do and won't do and who we are as a community, a few things that we do even still today were born in that time. So the first is his toy store, which we now call Christmas Toy Store, but it's essentially the big outreach that we do every Christmas season where we purchase and wrap and prepare a ton of toys for hundreds of families in our neighborhood.
Yeah, we started working with Hope for New York, an organization in the city that's been doing ministry for a long time. And they had a Christmas toy store for families in the neighborhood. And they said, would you help us just identify and find families? We did that. And very quickly, I realized that it was more meaningful than just a day. Maybe a couple weeks after the first time we did the toy store, I was walking down the block and this dude was like, yo, come here. Like, you that pastor, right? I say, I'm a pastor. He said, yo, you're the pastor of the church that gives away toys to the neighborhood. And I was like, yes, brother. And that meant a lot. He doesn't go to church, but I realized that it was having a bigger impact in terms of the name and the reputation of Renaissance. And so that was like a beautiful thing. And really so many people that we've met, there's a lot of people that have been baptized at Renaissance that have come through the toy store. Mm-hmm. And it became something that I realized want to galvanize our community around just being good neighbors to people in the community, and also to show some love, and also to just help people when people are open to being helped.
Yeah, and the evolution of it has been so cool to see, because it's not only grown in the number of families served and the number of people at Renaissance who volunteer, but also even this most recent one, having different organizations, community organizations who can provide different services and resources to the families who come through the door, and prayer for those families. And just, again, building a relationship that can continue beyond just a day, beyond just some of those early attempts at serving our community that we talked about. We realized maybe people are just taking an Instagram photo and posting it to show I did a good job, but like really
connecting people to the community.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we work and partner with WARM. We All Really Matter, an organization that helps women trapped in just domestic violence. And WARM had a table there, and I just watched some of the people there connecting with women at the WARM table. Yo, yes, you got your gifts. I hope the kids like them, but also, if this is your story right now, we're here to help. And just seeing them connect and seeing tears at that table, that was everything. And so that's been such a moment at our church where we're not just giving away toys, but we're connecting them with hopefully Jesus Christ and with each other in ways that are just much more meaningful. I think that's it. Like the story of the church, it's gone from attempts to like depth and continuing to like really dig our anchors down into the community, which is like so ridiculous and amazing to see. I remember like one day being there and thinking, yo, there's a lot of people here. And then going to the back and thinking and looking at the toys that we had, and I was like, there's not a lot of toys here. And I really was just thinking about what would it feel like to be a family who was promised a toy or toys, nice toys for your kids, and you came out and you pushed through whatever obstacles you had to get through that day. And I said, yo, we're getting the Uber, we're going to Target. And then people were like, what are we doing? And I took like 2 people with me, and we were like clearing the shelves, supermarket sweep style. And it was like 6 or 7 carts full of toys. And they like opened up a special lane for us to check us out. And we bought thousands of dollars of toys at Target and still barely had enough to get through all of the families. And by the time the toys ran out, we had gotten back, and there was a whole group of volunteers outside that were like running and racing to bring things inside, to hurry up and punish the tables. And by the time the next wave of families came in, they got even better toys than the first round of families that came. And I was just like so happy to look and see the smiles on their faces. But there's a lot of stuff. And early days, we weren't as organized as we are now in terms of our planning, but a lot of fun.
Yeah. Another thing that was born out of that time around 2016 is something we continue to do, which is Church and Chill.
Yeah.
Which it's a big production.
It is a massive production.
Church and Chill. We have church and then we chill, and there's food and there's games and there's everything. This past year we had both of our services 10 a.m. and 11:30 together. So it was like 700 people partying outside. But back then in 2016, it was legit maybe
9 people.
9 people. 2 friends started Church and Chill and just decided they were going to put a grill out. They were going to go to church and then invite people to come and chill in Morningside Park after service.
Yeah, and it started as this thing of, have you heard about Church and Chill? And it was like you had to be on the inside to like really have heard about it, to have gotten the invite. It was like the pass into Willy Wonka or something like that. And yeah, so it started off with just, and then the next one might have been like 40 people. And again, this was not like something we announced from the stage. It was just something like you had to know the right person.
It was an organic way to
An
just
organic
hang
thing.
out after service
Yeah, and
in
then
the park.
yeah, and then we started announcing it, and then it would be like, oh, like 100 people came out to Church and Chill, and then we moved it from Morningside to next to us in the courtyard, and then it became a huge production.
Yeah. It's been, I think, such a long-standing event at Renaissance because, again, in the same way you talked about the toy store capturing the heart of who we want to be, Church and Chill also captures the heart of who we want to be.
It's a day of delight.
It's a day of delight. It's a day of hospitality and welcoming as well. It's so many people come to Renaissance for the first time because of Church and Chill, because a friend said, this is a great Sunday to come to church. And I think it captures the heart of, we are people who are hopefully deeply convicted about following Jesus, but also really fun and normal. And we like to have a good time too. And so I think Church and Chill just captures the spirit of the Renaissance community, and that's why it has persisted for so long. By 2019, the church had continued to grow. We're probably around 400 people coming on a Sunday. And 5 years into Renaissance 2019, it was time for us to take a sabbatical. We'd done a lot in 5 years.
Yeah, I was tired.
And we were tired. We'd had another child, a second child, Josiah. In 2018, we'd, before he was born, gone through a miscarriage. We'd had continual things to manage with both our father's health. And in 2019, it was time to take a break.
Yeah. It wasn't the type of fatigue that like I didn't know what I wanted to do or I didn't know what was next. I had a ton of ideas. I was just tired. And I was like, man, before I hit a point of crashing and burning, we should take some time off. So taking that sabbatical, we did a month in Mexico City, one of my favorite cities on the planet, sitting outside in the taco stands, chilling, talking to people. And then a month back in New York City, just relaxing and decompressing. It really gave me a spaciousness. That really broke something in me in a good way. When I came back from sabbatical, my relationship to the church was different. That I didn't need Renaissance for Jordan Rice anymore. I think up to that point, we had done so much. I had done so much that who I was almost synonymous with how the church is doing. And I think that sabbatical was like so instrumental in breaking that connection. I still love Renaissance. I care about Renaissance deeply, but I no longer equate it with who I am and how I'm doing. So the church could be doing poorly and I could be doing great, or the church could be doing great and I could be doing poorly, but I no longer have them tied together in, I think, unhealthy ways like I did before.
Mm-hmm. And I think at that point when we left for sabbatical, it was this moment of coming up for air to say, oh my goodness, 5 years have gone by. We've done a lot for the church, but there's certainly things personally that we haven't done for ourselves. Like we hadn't been to the doctor in 5 years. We hadn't been to the dentist. You had put on a lot of weight, which I didn't notice, but you did. That started you on a health journey.
Yeah, just looking at myself and just being really unhappy with, oh, I'm really not thriving as a person. I'm like, yo, I'm just not doing well. And I can't do this for 20, 25 years at this pace. I'm gonna burn myself out. And so, yeah, sabbatical being a reset point to say I can be the best leader at Renaissance if I'm the best for myself, if I'm actually healthy. Yeah, the first 2 weeks being in Mexico City was absolutely miserable. I remember pretending like I was having a good time. And I was having a good time during the day, but at night I would just have this feeling of dread of what's gonna happen if something goes wrong. And it was one night, it was like 2:00 in the morning, being awake thinking about all the things that I didn't prepare the staff for. And that night I was thinking, what are they gonna do if there's a fire? I'm not a trained fireman. I don't have any skills and no training skills about how to navigate fires or what the church would do if there was a fire in a building. And I was like, yo, Jordan, you're really bugging, bro. Like, you're really going down a train of thought that I was like concerned. Oh man, you're really reaching, you're grasping for control that you don't have. And really, truly, you just feel powerless. And so you'd rather invent some random scenario that you can fix than to feel powerless. And to lay there and to confess that and to pray to God, God, I just feel powerless right now. And then that broke something. And I just went to sleep and I said, whatever happens, I'm 1,000 miles away. If there's a fire, they'll dial 911. And there's great leaders there that will figure out what to do next. But that's it. That's it. And then for the rest of the time, I was able to enjoy myself. And that really did start with the awareness of how much I was connected to the church in unhealthy ways, in some healthy and some unhealthy ways.
I think it's important to hear you say that, because I think oftentimes when you talk about Sabbath and you're encouraging people that work in secular spaces to take that 24-hour period of rest, that maybe they think, oh, it's easy for you as a pastor who focuses on spiritual things, but to recognize that those same strongholds or temptations of I have to keep going to keep up, or that fear of everything is going to fall apart if I stop, really transcends wherever people are working. And it just makes it all the more important to have the regular times of disconnecting. I can remember us getting back from sabbatical and it being so interesting to meet all these new people who had come to the church. 10 weeks we'd been away and them kind of being like, who are you? But that was cool.
Yeah, there was like somebody that came up to me in the hallway after, because we came back and I still didn't preach for the next 2 weeks. And then someone came up to me and was like trying to connect me to the community.
They're
and
like, hey, have you filled out a connection card?
Yes. And I was like, yeah, I filled one. I've been around for a while. I wasn't around this summer. They're like, oh man, like how long have you been at part of Renaissance? I'm like, yep, we've been here since the start. And they were like, really? And they were telling me, it was amazing to see that the community wasn't really just about me and you. It was about, we had started something, and that really was success, that people didn't need us to be a part of it. Hopefully we're still helpful and still a blessing to the church, but that we were like not the centerpiece of it, but Jesus and the community were the centerpiece of it.
Yeah, it was a great feeling. And I think a testament to, or really a reason why we continue to thrive and grow, because there were people who were living out the values of Renaissance. And 2020 rolls around.
Yeah.
A new year full of hope.
Oh yeah.
Full of dreams.
Yep.
We're running out of space again. And now we've done the whole going from 1 to 2 services. It is time for us to go from 2 to 3 services. And we make a big announcement, and there is raucous applause. People can't wait. And then the world shuts down.
Yeah, you remember 2020. That's for the next episode. Man, God loves the church, and the church is the people. Among all the difficulties and stumbles are overwhelming joys and incredible glimpses of God's work. Well, that's it for now. We have more people to come in the next episode, more of those difficulties and more of those joys. I hope you'll join us.